Have you ever considered that sit-ups may actually be doing you more harm than good? So why is this the case and what can we do instead? For as long as there have been gyms, there have been sit-ups, and for good reason. They're easy to do, there's a low barrier to entry, and they don't take any equipment. But are these really good reasons? Because you'll see these reasons, these benefits, are more about sit-ups being easy to do, being easy to complete, than they are about them being effective exercises. Okay, so whoa, let's just ease up a second. A quick little asterisk on this, on the word good. What is a good exercise? What is a bad exercise? Of course, it's all relative, and exercise exists on a continuum. On one end of the continuum, we have the worst exercises, and on one end of the continuum, we have the better exercises. There's no good and bad, there's just better and worse. And our aim, and the aim here, is to try and get you moving up towards the better end of this continuum and away from the worst end of this continuum. So not good and bad, just better and worse. Now, something else to get out of the way. Sit-ups, of course, are not an effective method of burning off that stubborn belly fat. It's a myth called spot reduction that implies that if you exercise a certain muscle group, it will burn fat off the part of the body around that muscle group, and it's not the case. So now that we've got that out of the way, why do people do sit-ups? It's normally for one of two reasons. Firstly, they want to build a sexy six-pack, a good set of abs, and secondly, it's because maybe they're trying to improve the strength, the stamina, the stability, and the functionality of the muscles around the midsection of the body. Now, I don't really want to comment on effective exercises to build a six-pack, because at Range of Motion, it's not really what we're about. We're more about the pursuit of health than the pursuit of aesthetics. Of course, aesthetics often comes along with health. This is a happy side effect, but it's not our primary focus. So with that in mind, what is the function of the abdominal musculature? What is the role of those muscles that run down the front of your trunk, down the front of your torso? Well, they are not so much about creating movement, but more about resisting movement. So what do I mean by this? Well, if your abs have evolved to create movement, it means they've evolved to do a crunch, to pull your rib cage down towards the top of your pelvis, almost like you're folding in half at your belly button. This isn't what the abs have evolved to do. Our abs have actually evolved to resist movement. It's not about crunching the rib cage down, as it is preventing our body from going into hyperextension. It's about preventing our back from going into that extended position where we can start to do some damage. Our abs are there to create a solid foundation to resist movement, which is why they're stabilizing muscles as opposed to prime moving muscles. They're there to create this stability, this stable base from which we can then perform a whole other raft of movements with our extremities. So here's our first clue as to why sit-ups may not be the most effective movement. Sit-ups, of course, are a movement-based exercise. They're using our abs to create movement rather than to resist movement. Right, let's get a little scientific and talk anatomy for a moment. Your back, of course, your spine is made up of your bony vertebrae and those softer discs in between them. These are the joints between your vertebrae. And if we zoom in on these discs, we can see that there are two main parts that we are concerned about. First, we have the nucleus, which is on the inside, which is a softer, more pliable type of tissue. And then outside that, we have the annulus, which is a little bit tougher. Think of this like a jam donut. You have a jam donut, inside is the nucleus, the jam, and outside that dough is the annulus. So what effect do sit-ups have on this jam donut? Well, over time, a repetitive flexing of your spine, which is what we see in a sit-up type movement, can start to squeeze some of that jam, some of the nucleus, out of the donut. As it squeezes out, it can start to press and compress on nerves, which can cause a lot of the pain associated with lower back injury and lower back dysfunction. In fact, a recent study by the United States military indicated that of all of the injuries that came across as part of their physical training and testing, 56% of these injuries were attributed to their sit-up test. So what's that? Sit-ups are gonna kill my back, I'm never doing them again. Not so fast. We're not saying that sit-ups are inherently a bad movement. In fact, they're often a necessary movement. If we come back to our pursuit of health and functionality, not only today, but also into older age, we know that it's important to be able to lie on your back and sit up. It's how we get out of bed, it's how we get off the floor. If we've had a fall, it's an integral part of being able to get back onto our feet. So they're not an inherently bad movement. What we're saying is that they are grossly overused. They are the go-to abdominal exercise. And maybe there are some better alternatives, and we'll talk about these in a moment. But first, it's important to understand that we are not saying that flexing your spine is inherently a bad thing. Your spine needs to be mobile to be able to create movement. Imagine if your spine were replaced with a steel rod, it would be very hard to function. So we're not saying that flexing your spine, that going into that rounded lower back position is necessarily a bad thing. We're just saying that we don't necessarily want to do it under a lot of load. It's okay to passively go into this position, but it's not the best idea to load up your discs, to load up your lower back when you're in this flexed spine shape. Now, the leading world authority on lower back health is Dr. Stuart McGill. And he's done a lot of research into the compressive effects that a sit-up has on the discs in your lower back. And what he's found is that by doing a standard sit-up, you can put as much as 340 kilograms worth of force through your discs. That's with every single sit-up that you do. So again, we're not saying that movement of your spine is bad, we're saying that excessive loading and excessive repetitive loading of your discs using this movement is not necessarily the best approach. So hopefully you can see that maybe we should be limiting the number of sit-ups that you should be doing. Let's talk about 4 different strategies to be able to do this, and maybe some ideas of things you can replace your sit-ups with to create a more stable, functional, and healthy torso. So our first tip is to use movements that resist movement as opposed to creating movement as a sit-up does. We're talking movements like L-sits and hollow holds, things like bridges. These sort of movements are a great addition to teach your body to use your abs as they were intended by evolution, not to use your abs for a contrived sit-up or trunk flexion type movement. Our second tip is to train your abs without using traditional isolation ab-based exercises. And it's very hard to move, to do gross, large, compound, functional human movements without using your abs. Try doing a squat without your abs turning on. Try doing a deadlift. Try doing strongman type exercises. One of the best ways to learn to stabilize your torso is to lift these large loads in these functional movements. If you can train heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, Olympic weightlifting, strongman type movements, you are going a long way to creating a strong, stable, functional, and safe midsection. Our third strategy is to reduce the number of reps you're doing in sit-up type movements, where you're repetitively and continually flexing the spine. Now, research from the Auckland University of Technology recommended that you should not be doing more than 60 reps of this type of movement at a time. So keep the volume and the repetition count low. And our final strategy is to reduce the amount of sit-ups you're doing by replacing them with other movements that also flex the spine. Now, as we've talked about, this is not our preferred alternative. It's not our preferred option, because if we're repetitively flexing the spine, we start to get some of these issues that we were speaking about. However, if you must do these sort of movements, maybe you need them for a sport that you compete in, or you're adamant that you want to do something to feel that burn in your abs, try a little bit more variety. Imagine you take a piece of wire. If you want to break that piece of wire, you can't pull it to break on it, but you will bend and extend, bend and extend, bend and extend. Eventually it'll start to weaken, and eventually that piece of wire will snap. Your lower back operates in a very similar way. And if you're trying to break this piece of wire, you want to keep bending and extending in the same place. If we can do different movements as part of your trunk flexion type training, then we're going to be bending and extending in different places along the wire, in different places along your spine. So putting in movements like toes to bar, similar variations on rings, on bars, etc. You can start to get a similar sort of action if you must get this sort of action, but without that repetitive loading in the exact same points in your body. Variety here is key. So those are our 4 key tips for replacing sit-ups in your training, and a little bit of justification of the science behind why we think this is really important. Add some variety into what you're doing, keep your body guessing, keep your body evolving. It will not only create a strong and stable midsection, but it will keep your body safe and healthy for the long run.